You are being lied to, and if you watch until the end of this video, you are going to see exactly why 7 very popular statistics are used to manipulate what you think when it comes to real estate. Doesn't matter if it's the industry itself or the media that picks up on the statistics and then twists it to mess with your mind and prevent you from understanding what's really happening in the market and prevent you from really understanding what pricing of housing should be for their advantage. Watch to the end of this video and comment below to let me know if these are things you've thought about before or if I've really been able to enlighten you with a new perspective on 7 statistics that are used to screw you. Also, a big shout out to everybody who follows me on Instagram at RealMeetKevin, and thank you so much for voting on whether or not you like the vlog style educational content or this providing more office studio style content. And we had about a 50-50 split, which means we're going to gear this channel towards providing you about 50-50 content. So stay tuned and you're gonna see a lot of variety on this channel and a whole lot more perspective, because that's what we do here, whether it's bad news, good news, medium news, something I messed up on, I'm gonna bring it to you straight, because that's what I do. I go to sleep at night knowing everything I said was the truth. Before we get into the exact 7 ways you're being cooked when it comes to real estate statistics, you need to know that real estate is a lagging industry. What that means is when folks tell you that housing sales were down in June, that housing sales plummeted in June, which they did, you need to realize that that is actually indicative of a market decline, an inflection point in the market, or a change in direction in May. That's because real estate takes 30, 45 or 60 days on average to close escrow. So when a transaction sells, you still have to wait around for a month to 2 months for that deal to show up as sold. So when we say that sales plummeted in June, we're really saying the market hit a wall in May. This is important because if you're like the many people who are leaving me comments saying, Kevin, why are you talking about the market crashing? My market is still great and prices are still through the roof. What are you talking about? You crazy. You need to realize that there might be an inflection point in your market as well. And it's not just because people are leaving California because it's too expensive. That's a very simple argument, and it might be a good argument, but it's not what is driving the statistics. So don't kid yourself. If you think your market's hot, is it as hot as it was 3 months ago or 4 months ago? Ask a realtor to find out. Now let's expose exactly the 7 statistics that are used to mess with you and manipulate you when it comes to real estate. I do want to send a thank you to everybody who commented on the new sort of studio setup here and mentioned that I used too many angles last time in terms of flipping around too much, so we're going to flip around less. Please let me know if this is better. And so you can track my improvement, hit this little bell icon here next to the subscribe button, which I'm sure you've already pressed, even though I know that 63% of you haven't. Content 1, month's supply and the myth of housing inventory. Folks, I am sick and tired of hearing, well, housing inventory is low, therefore the market cannot be falling. We've talked about this before in the live stream, so we won't go into too much detail here, but I am adding the fact that month's supply is directly correlated to the inventory myth. When people say month's supply, here's what they mean. There are 200 houses on the market, and on average, 100 houses sell in this city every month. Therefore, we have 2 months' supply of housing inventory on the market. When inventory starts saturating, we start seeing 5 to 7 months of housing inventory sitting on the market. When things are very in favor of sellers, we see about 1 month's supply of inventory on the market. But here is what month's supply and inventory does not tell you about the real estate market. Much like unemployment statistics, which do not factor in the consideration that there are people who are considered discouraged workers, as in they gave up looking for a job and are no longer part of the unemployment statistic because they don't even try anymore. Real estate is much the same. Present housing inventory and present month's supply do not tell you about the amount of discouraged sellers who have either lost their listings through expiration, lost their listing through cancellation, or they withdrew the property from the market for any reason. The most likely reason properties are withdrawn from the market is that houses aren't selling. The more the feeling spreads that houses are not selling like the hotcakes they used to be, less sellers decide to put their property on the market. That means while inventory may look depressed, this statistic does not take advantage of discouraged sellers. Therefore, month supply and inventory levels should always be considered with a grain of salt. But we're getting to a lot worse deception here, so stay tuned for the other 6 methods of deception. Number 2, here is the most common argument when we talk about interest rates and how it's wrong. Because people don't consider all of the factors, and I'm about to tell you the missing facts. In addition to that, I'll give you an example as to why the market is plummeting, thanks to what appears to be a relatively small interest rate change. Every time I talk about interest rates to somebody, whether it's on YouTube or in person or on Instagram, I cannot get away from the old school argument of, oh, wait, poor you, interest rates went from 3.5% to 5%. Well, back in the day, interest rates were 15% or 18%. We celebrated when interest rates went below 10%. 2 things as to why that mentality is completely garbage and is misleading you in your thinking when it comes to real estate. Number 1, look at inflation. People lend money at rates above what inflation is. Inflation today is slightly below 2%. So what do we lend money for? About 2.5% more than that. 4.5% or 5%. That's what your 30-year fixed rate is today. And guess what the usual savings rate is? About 1% less than inflation. This is why people say that people who save money lose money, because they're making about 1% while the market is eating away about 2% of their money thanks to inflation. Now, consider the 1970s and 80s, when inflation fluctuated between 8% to as high as over 14% inflation in the United States. This also impacted Canada. So now, when somebody tells you, well, interest rates were 15%, yes, but if inflation was 13%, no surprise. So we can't say that, oh, well, rates were so high back then. We have to consider the time value of money and how much inflation is chewing away the value of our dollar, because that is what lending is going to be based on. There's a reason why milk went from 50 cents to $1 and now $3. And guess what? $3 for a gallon of milk is still artificially low. It's so subsidized by the government. Milk should probably be closer to $6 a gallon. That's a topic for a different video. The second part of this, and I'm not going to go too deep into this one, but consider the fact that home prices were significantly lower in the 70s and 80s. So higher interest rates and high inflation actually really wasn't that big of a deal. In fact, it helped the government get out of a significant amount of debt. Because guess what inflation does for debtors? It makes their debt less valuable and a lot easier to pay off. So you want the national debt to go away? Pump up inflation, and the national debt will go away like that. Now let's give you an example as to how interest rates actually impact home buyers today. When somebody moves out of a $600,000 house, and literally in this example moves right back into that $600,000 house, because of the increase in interest rates, their payment would go up by about $450. Generally, people want to move into a nicer or better home when they move. Even if they're downsizing, they usually want to increase their quality. So in order for somebody to move up in quality, they would ordinarily go from a $600,000 house to, let's say, a $675,000 house. That increase would usually cost them also $450. But now, because of the change in interest rates and the fact that most people have already either through refinance or a low purchase locked in low interest rates over the last 6 years, somebody who wants to move up $75,000 has to pay $900 more per month. That's because they're in the whole $450 thanks to the bump in interest rates. And then they pay about $450 for every $75,000 they go up in value. Therefore, they are in the hole $900 if they just want to move up $75,000. I ask you, explore your neighborhood and ask yourself, if my house is $200,000, what does $275 buy me? If my house is $600,000, what does $675 buy me? It ain't that much better. It ain't even worth moving. Realistically, you probably want to go up about $150 when you move. Now, your payment's going up $1,350 per month, and that's quite a different tier. That means if you were used to paying $2,650 per month, which is basically in the middle range between $2,000 and $3,000, very normal payment, especially here in Southern California, your payment just by moving $150,000 would go over $4,000 per month. That's nuts, and people aren't willing to do that. Number 3, the deception of year-over-year data. You cannot use year-over-year pricing data the way you think you can. Let's first say how you can use year-over-year data. When we analyze how many sales were there in June of 2016, about 1,000. How many sales were there in June of 2017, also about 1,000. How many sales were there in June of 2018? 780. Oh my gosh, 21% decline. What's happening? That's fair data to use because you are comparing sales volume in a particular month, which is not impacted by the month before it and does not impact the month after it. On the other hand, when you use year-over-year price data, and you're like the news articles today that say, housing sales plummeted 20%, but prices are still up year-over-year. We got a 7% increase in prices. You're being lied to. Here's why. Pricing data is based on comps, the sales that came before it. That means pricing does not move in a plot pattern, which we could just plot and not draw a line in between like we can with housing sales volume data. Pricing moves in a linear fashion, which means we connect the dots, as in sales prices today are generally based on the comps of sales before it. So if prices went up 5% last July, and 1% last August, and 1% last September, and then stayed completely flat for the rest of the year, we would say, wow, year over year, prices went up 7%. The same thing happened in 2013. Prices went up about 25% year over year in 2013. But prices really went up 20% in March and April combined, and then 5% spread out over the rest of the year. So the way that looks is big spike and then normal path. You can see how this data could be very manipulating. In today's example, watch this. Prices went up last summer a little bit. Then they stayed flat throughout the winter, and prices went up in January and March. But prices started falling in April, May, and June. However, when we take the year-over-year data from June to June, we level out these larger increases from last summer and the beginning of this year to bring up the fact that sales prices fell in May, June, and July. We level that data out and we say, prices still went up. Well, you're deceiving yourself if you believe that, because the trend is what happened last. And what's the very last thing that happened? Prices fell 1% between June and July. A 1% decrease from one month to the next is equivalent to a 12% annual decline. Be careful using year-over-year data when it comes to pricing. Number 4, price per square foot data. You cannot use price per square foot the way you think you can. Most people say that if my house is worth $400,000 and I have a 1,000 square foot house, then that means if I add a 100 square foot addition to my house, the value of my house will go up by $40,000, or 100 times 400. However, that's not correct. If that owner's lucky, they'd maybe get their building costs out of it of about $150 per square foot. Here's why. Price per square foot works really well in office and commercial space because an extra 100 square feet is an extra 100 square feet of space that you can use for desks or flooring or storage. But in a house, you have a kitchen, you have a plumbing system, an electrical system, the foundation, the roof, all on a significantly smaller scale than you do with commercial. Therefore, you could add a 50 square foot bathroom and get $400 a square foot. But if you add a 100 square foot addition, you might only get $15,000 in market value. That's because the comps in the neighborhood bring everything back down to the median, and added square footage does not give you the full pop per square foot value you think it might. Talk to any professional appraiser and they will reiterate this. In fact, I encourage you to do this. If you've ever bought a home or refinanced a home, I dare you to look at your appraisal and look at the square footage adjustments that the appraisers use when they value your property. You're probably going to find that the appraisers are using square foot adjustments of anywhere between $50 per foot or $120 per square foot, not purchase price divided by square footage. That is completely wrong math, and it is very, very dangerous when it comes to pricing real estate. Because the dangerous thing that happens is folks say, well, I have a 2,800 square foot house. That person has a 2,700 square foot house. Since houses are selling for $400 a square foot, mine must be worth $40,000 more. Wrong. It might be worth $10,000 to $15,000 more. That's it. Number 5. I hate to bring this one up because I feel like I am stabbing real estate agents in the back, but folks, this is one of the biggest lies that you need to know about. Sale to list ratio. What this means is if somebody sold a house for $99,000 that was listed for $100,000, the agent can claim, I sold that house for 99% of list price. But folks, this math does not consider the fact that this agent may have listed that property for $125,000, sat on the market for 90 days, dropped the price to $120, $115, $110, $105, and then $100. Oh, and then it sold for within $1,000 of the listing price. Oh, agent's a pro. They could sell houses for 99% of list price. Scam. Wrong. It is not based on the original list price. It's based on the current list price. And that is messed up and deceptive. And that's a perfect example as to how you could get screwed when it comes to considering data in how you're going to sell a house. Number 6, people will mess with you when it comes to using average instead of median when it comes to housing data. So anytime you hear the word average home price, average days on the market, you're probably getting cooked. So be very, very careful when you hear that word. What you want is median. And let me explain the difference by example. Let's say we have 100 children in a classroom, and each of those children has a net worth of $100. That means the entire classroom has a combined net worth, assuming there's no teacher inside, of $10,000. Now let's say Bill Gates walks into the room with a net worth of $100 million. Now there are 101 people in this very large classroom, and every single person has an average net worth. All of these children have an average net worth of $1 million. They're all millionaires. You've got 101 millionaires in this room. However, if we take the median net worth, we're at the right position. $100 is the median. This is how you can get screwed when it comes to sales data. Average days on the market, average sales prices. Be very, very, very careful when it comes to averages. Oh, and don't be average as well. The average people who watch this channel have not yet clicked the subscribe button, so don't be in the average. Press the subscribe button and make sure to click the little belly thing too so you can be part of that notification squad and see every time I upload a video and expose some reality to you and share some perspective. Number 7, the danger of using a sample set that is too small. In statistics, there are formulas that will tell you how large of a sample size you need. That is, how much data you need to actually have a realistic margin of error or margin of safety in your statistics. We're not going to go into math here, but what I want you to know is think about this. If I look at county-wide data and I say that sales plummeted 21%, I have 1,000 sets of data. That's good, and I consistently have 1,000 sets of data. However, let's say I say, oh my gosh, 3 houses hit the market this week in the Woodside Greens neighborhood, and 3 houses canceled in the Groves neighborhood. Well, now all of a sudden I could say sales volume triples in Woodside Greens, sales volume plummets, hits rock bottom in the Groves, because the sample size is way too small. City data is usually also too small. If you're looking at cities with populations of under 500,000, I believe your sample set is going to be too small, and you really need to look at county-wide data. If you have at least 750,000 to 1 million people on a data set, you probably have more accurate data. For example, if I take Ventura and I say, oh, sales went up, sales volume is up in Ventura, oh, but it's down in Oxnard, I'm able to tell myself, this is a wash, maybe the market's fine, and I could deceive myself. However, if I look at county-wide data and I see that the entire county is moving in a negative direction, I can prepare myself appropriately for a market decline. What is happening here? got it.